We're going to try and lay it down on the ground and then kind of morph it around the shoe here. So it looks like it's kind of following the curve. Let's do that now using Adobe Photoshop's transform tools. All right, let's open up the file we're going to be working with. File open, and we're working in the exercise files in this folder called 08 transform. Open the one called transform 01. Great, so we want to mock up this logo on this. Let's look at the basics for transforming first, then we'll go and add the logo. So to bring in the image, I can open it, copy and paste it, which we've been doing for a lot of this course. I'm going to show you another way. File, there's one that says place embedded. Okay, and go to that same folder and open up logo AI, click place. It's going to put it as a smart object automatically because it knows it's an AI file and it goes, your vector, you should be smart object. And we're totally down with smart objects now. All we need to do is give it a size and then hit return because it's kind of stuck in this kind of like limbo mode. Can you see none of these things work? So if I hold down shift, okay, and we can scale it down to something appropriate like that, hit enter. And what we're going to do is we'll start with one copy just up here. We're going to duplicate the logo, right click, duplicate layer. This is going to be called logo 2 and we'll move it down. And let's look at the basics for transforming. Let's go to edit, transform, and we've dealt with scale before and rotate before. And some of the other easy ones that you might use is rotate clockwise, counterclockwise. We'll go back the other way. You can flip it 180, which flips it completely upside down. Another one in there you might use is flip horizontal and vertical. It's not going to really work in this case. If I go horizontal, it's backwards logo, but it's good to know where that's kept. I'm going to undo. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to kind of bend it down the bottom here, like we saw in the intro on the floor. And under edit, transform, you can see a bunch of these are grayed out. Remember in the last video where we talked about smart objects, and most things work with it except for the very first thing we're going to do in this course after we've learned. Convert everything to a smart object. Because distort, perspective, and warp don't work. And those are the ones we want to learn. So remembering how to convert it from a smart object back to regular layer is right click logo and say, I would like you to be a rasterized layer. Nothing much changes except that little icon's gone and magically edit, transform, these things appear. Now I never use skew. I'll save you the trouble of testing it because it just does this. I'm not sure when you'd use that. Or at least I don't use it, so I'm going to hit escape as the kind of I didn't mean it button. Escape on my keyboard. But the ones that I do use, we're going to use, say, distort first. I love this one. And it's really good for mocking up like signs that you've made onto real objects. So this one here, I'm just going to I'm clicking anywhere but the center, moving it down here. And all you do is grab the corners and it's kind of like in this weird flat plane that you can start manipulating. Now it's not going to match the background automatically. Okay, so there's a lot of just you having a look. I'm doing it right now by I don't know why I close one eye when I'm doing it. Seems to help with my perspective. Does that look like it's on the ground? It's good enough. When I'm ready, hit enter. You could fake a sign for a billboard, or say you've mocked up a cover of a magazine. You could have a picture of a magazine, bring in your, say, InDesign cover ideas and mock it up using that distort. Now the next one I want is I'm going to duplicate logo again. I'm going to look at warp. So right clicking it, duplicate layer, logo 3. Remember, right click it and say you have to be a rasterized layer. Sorry, buddy. I'm gonna move it down to kind of roughly where I want it. I'm gonna get it down to a rough size. I'm using edit, transform, scale. Okay, yeah. Now we're gonna use the edit, transform, and we're gonna use this one called warp. I'm gonna zoom in a bit and show you how it works. It's a little weird. Okay, grab one of the corners, click hold and just give it a wiggle. Kind of turns it more like fabric. Whereas the last one made it like a block, made it like a sheet that you could kind of manipulate. Okay, this one here is a lot more, warp here is a lot more kind of elastic. Okay, it's more like a sheet of paper. So I can move it around. So there's two parts to it. There's these corners, they're called anchor points. Okay, so the edge of this image has to go to that anchor point wherever it is. These other little things here called handles are the way that the line gets influenced. Okay, you can see it doesn't, nothing actually has to pass through this little black dot, but it kind of like gravity, kind of like distorts the line before it hits the anchor point. So just know every anchor point here has two handles. There's a top one, okay, and the bottom one. And now it's the same principle again. There's a lot of just kind of like dragging it around, saying, okay, I feel like that's the bottom. I'm trying to get the perspective lining with the bottom of that shoe there. And then see these two little handles here? I'm just trying to distort it to make it feel like it was following the kind of path. I have it up a little bit there. It's hard with these little weavy lines to follow, but same with this one here. You can see it kind of double back on itself. So I want it about there, but then I'm gonna have to adjust these lines. So a lot of messing around, just getting a feel for it. This bottom one here, it's a little hard to see some of these dots. I shouldn't have picked a stripy shoe. If you're practicing with me, you're cursing the stripy shoe. Probably cursing the shoe theme throughout this whole course. Hope you're not getting too bored of it, but I went with the shoe theme. Okay, so what am I doing now? I'm just kind of messing around trying to get it to flow. Now, can you see the lines in the center here are kind of a bit weird? You can actually just click and drag these as well, any of these points in here, because we've kind of fixed the outside. Now we just need to kind of drag the inside to make it feel like it was part of it. Good. It's okay. All right, I'm gonna stop there because you're just watching me do this. I could be at it for a while. Hit return when you're ready. Zoom out and you've got something kind of bent around the shape. I haven't done a great job. One of the things that make it super obvious is that the colors are just super strong and don't have any of this kind of, they're not interacting with the background very much. So we've looked at this before, remember blending modes? So on my logo 3, okay, it's this layer here, turn the eyeball on and off. Up where it says normal, remember we've played around with a few of these. We're gonna look at multiply and that kind of works. It's kind of cool and maybe a bit strong. So you just work your way through all these options to find one that you feel works good with your shoe and your image and your background color. I was playing around with this. What looked good? Linear light, I think it did. I kind of like linear light. Changed the color quite a bit of my graphics, so maybe that's not what I want. Hard light. Maybe that's a bit closer. And I really want to go back and fix this because it doesn't look very realistic. Cool. So I hope you got an understanding of some of those transform tools. I don't use them all. Some of them are just a bit weird, like perspective. Just use distort, quicker and easier, in my opinion. Last little things I'll throw in at the end here are image and sometimes image rotation. Instead of doing it per layer, you can do the whole thing. Remember we looked at rotating it clockwise, just the particular layer? This does the whole graphic. Same with flipping it. So if you want to flip this across, okay, the whole thing rather than just a particular layer. Plus there was rotate in there, image rotation, and there's a few little things in there to work with. That's where they're hiding. All right, I will see you in the next video. Go back, we're gonna start with this image and do this to it. It's really easy, let's get started. All right, to make this happen, let's go to File, let's go to Open, and in our 08 Transform folder, open up Warp 1 and 2, and click Open. Okay, so we've got a sky that we're gonna reveal and our kind of cloudy background. It's super easy. The one thing we have to do is edit. Can you see under transform it's not available? It's because this background layer is locked. We looked at this earlier. To get rid of the lock, super easy. Double click the background, give it a name, landscape even. Now with that layer selected, we can go to edit and transform to live. I'm just gonna use warp. Just click on warp. Okay, grab this top left corner, just drag it so it kind of looks like it overlaps. You can start playing around with handles depending on how you want this kind of fabric or paper to feel. Okay, for me, I don't know what I'm doing. That looks good. There we go. Pull back to reveal. Let's click enter. Now go to warp. Now go to warp 2. With your move tool, click, hold, and drag the image. Drag, drag, drag. Holding it down, dragging, dragging to the tab, then let go down here. Just make sure the layer's underneath. And just move it around until you feel like you've found like a part of the image that, I don't know, works for, that looks kind of good. Yeah, nice. Now the one thing you can do to kind of make this feel a little bit more real as far as this can get is you can use the burn tool. So what you might do is let's click on the landscape layer. And we looked at the burn tool when we faked shadows. This is the same thing here. So click on the burn tool. Yours might be set to the dodge tool. So click and hold it down until you find the burn tool. And with the ranges, let's set it to mid-tones and let's be at 50%. Brush size, that's a little big. Maybe something like 200. And I'm just gonna kind of add a bit of maybe some darkness down here so it looks like it's kind of, you know, curling over on itself. Staying away from that edge there. Yeah, to make it like it's casting a shadow. Kind of want to do it to there as well, over this edge. Now what you'll find with the burn tool is we're on mid-tone, so it's only dealing with those kind of mid-tones. So if there's white like there is here, can you see it doesn't really adjust it? So I'm going to do it, but it doesn't really get it. So you can switch it between shadows, which is the really dark colors, and the highlights. In this case is what I want. Can you see now it's affecting the clouds a little better? So you might have to switch between these two to give it a bit of depth and roll. Same with you guys down here. I kind of make it look like it's casting a shadow. So depending on the image, you might have to flick through all three of these to get it kind of right. All right, so that is a really kind of quick use of some of those transform tools, and you see it quite a bit. You also see people kind of like getting a model that's maybe pulling the edge of this, and they cut them out and set them in the image. Might be a rope connected to this, maybe just a big hand. All right, so that is going to be it for this tutorial. Nice quick one. See you in the next video. Going to move his belly in and his biceps out. So much easier than the gym. We're going to use the liquify tool in Photoshop. All right, let's get started. Let's go to File and open up Liquify 1. Whatever you do, don't open up 2 yet. That's a surprise for later. Before we get started, it's best to right-click the background and convert to a smart object. Just means that later on we can turn this filter on and off. Otherwise, it's distorted forever. With that layer selected, let's go to Filter and let's go to Liquify. So before we get started, I love that this technology, I love that it can do it. It's amazing that Photoshop can do it. But I also acknowledge that I spend a lot of time teaching people in magazines how to retouch models and how to kind of remove the folds and rolls that we all have. I don't know, there's a little bit of awkwardness around retouching bodies. Okay, so what ends up happening is Liquify is this kind of like separate little window here. Okay, so you kind of work within this window when we're liquifying. The first tool we use is this one here called Forward Warp. Okay, and in terms of the brush size, you can drag it over here. I'm just using the same technique we used earlier on, the square brackets. I'm going to pick a nice big brush, something like 500, and I'm going to click, hold, and slowly drag. It's best to do little bits at a time so you get a feel for the tool. If you try and drag it all in one go, it ends up looking a little bit more fake than this does. So we're just kind of clicking, dragging, little steps, little baby steps. Okay, just to tidy in. Now I'm going to make my brushes a little bit smaller because I want to kind of affect this bit. Just want a little bit. Now I'm trying to get it flat. How good is it? Actually, we want him to be. Let's get him right in there. You're welcome, buddy. All right. So turn preview on and off down here to kind of see how it was before and how it is now. Now there are going to be some problems in this one. There's kind of like folds of the skin here that we just can't get rid of with the Liquify tool. We can get rid of it with the healing brush, which we'll do in an upcoming video. So we'll maybe double back to this guy. And what am I doing with him? I'm just kind of, I don't know. I feel like I've invaded his personal space now. It's fine with the belly, but it's not anymore. Anyway, so yeah, the forward warp is a nice easy one. Okay, I'm going back to a big brush. I'm just going to kind of push this bit in. It's better to use a big brush and just small movements than small brushes. It ends up looking quite obvious what you're up to. So remember before and after. All right, let's look at some of the other tools. Let's look at this one here first. So there's this one called Pucker and Bloat. Pucker makes things smaller. So I'm going to use a brush size. You can play around with things like the density and rate, just how much it affects it. I find by default Photoshop have got it pretty good, but you can mess around with that if it's kind of going too fast or too slow for you. So I'm going to click once on his nipple, click a couple of times. Can you see him just make it a little smaller? I'm going to make that bit a little smaller. I'm going to grab the bloat tool. Okay, what do we want to make bigger? We're going to give him big muscles. So I'm going to nice big brush, and around the bicep area, I'm just clicking once. You can see it just gets fractionally bigger. I'm just double clicking, triple clicking, trying to give him some bigger biceps. Okay, same with, I'm gonna make it slightly smaller for his triceps, make them a bit bulgier. There is a point where it starts looking really fake, as in the skin and all of its texture becomes a bit overdone. So you gotta be careful. We're just messing about here, so we're not too worried. We're going a little bit overboard. Let's give him some big forearms. And let's puff out his chest a little bit. I'll show you two other features. There's lots in here, can get quite complicated, but let's stick to the stuff that's easy and that you'll use most of the time. There's these two here, which are quite useful. There's this thing called freeze and thaw. So hit freeze, pick a brush size. Let's say I'm gonna click on his nipple, make it go red. Okay, I've clicked it a couple of times. All that means is that when I start using other tools, say the forward warp, got the big brush, watch what happens if I start dragging it. Kind of like, it's called freeze, so it freezes it in place. All right, so I paused that because I broke down in laughter. All right, we're back though. But you get the idea of what it does, right? So I'm gonna undo using edit, step backwards. And it just freezes particular areas. Say it might be like a logo that's on a shirt and you're trying to distort the fabric. Okay, so you want to keep the logo frozen while you're distorting around it. And when you're finished, see the Thor button here? Okay, you click on that and just color it out. And now it's back to normal. Now the last thing I'll show you is this tool up here. It's called the Reconstruct tool. And basically it's like an undo brush or a history brush. So I'm gonna make it a bit bigger. All it's gonna do is, remember this is my original. Okay, and this is where it's at now. If I paint across stuff, you can see it's gonna kind of put it back to where it was. Okay, so it's a brush that allows you to kind of undo as a brush rather than going step backwards. I'm gonna step backwards, and let's just say I was working on it, but this bit just looks a bit weird, so I'm going to click and hold and put it back to where it was. When you are finished, you can click OK. And the cool thing about it is that Liquify is something I can turn on and off. It's a little bit stressful on your machine though, but we are professionals now. We're using smart objects and in turn using smart filters on top of them. All right, your homework is going to be opening up Liquify 2. That is my gift to you today. Open it up and enjoy the experience. I will see you in the next video if you come back. Bye now. Hi there, this cool little video is using the same techniques we learned in the last video using the Liquify tool, but we're going to turn it into drippy text. You can do the same thing with a logo or maybe an icon. Let's jump in now and learn how. First up, let's open up our image. You can use any image. I'm using from your exercise files, 08 transform. There's one here called paint text 01. Open that one up. I picked this one mainly because I just wanted green as part of that finished example, but you can pick any image you like. What I find though is before we get started, it's quite nice to get rid of some of the detail. It would depend on your image and what the effect you want at the end. For the one you saw at the beginning, I went to filter, I went to noise, I went to this one called median. You can see you can crank it right up, crank it down, okay, just to get rid of some of the detail to make it more look a little bit more painterly. Let's click OK. Next thing I want to do is put you could put a logo here, copied and pasted from Illustrator. I'm just going to grab the type tool. The font size here is going to be quite big, about 900, maybe even bigger. 1000. Now in terms of the font here, I'm using this one called Remachine just because it's a nice kind of script. I'm going to click once, type a G, doesn't really matter what color it is. Grab the move tool, stick it in the middle. Now Remachine is a font that I've included in your exercise files. Here it is here, it's an 08 transform under font. It's a font by Mans Grebeck, and it's for personal use only. If you want to use this font for commercial use, read the license, download it, pay for it. It's a pretty awesome font. I like it because it's got a kind of a swirl to it. So for this to work, we need to clip the image inside of the text. We did this in an earlier video. Have a little think, rack your brain. You're like, how do I crop the text inside of here? I'll wait here, you go do it. If you can't remember, let's practice again. So we need the image above the text, which we can't do because it's locked, but we know we can unlock a background by double clicking it. I call it green, give it a name, and then we can stick it above. And with this top one selected, we go layer, we go to this one called create clipping mask. Now with your move tool, I'm going to move it around because I want one of the pigeons involved. I'm not really sure why. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to merge these two here. You should do a save as now. So you've got a backup copy. So I have two versions, this one before we went along and wrecked it, but it's wrecking time. So I'm going to have both of these selected. I click the top one, held shift, click the second one. So they're both selected. And this little flyout menu here, there's one in there that says merge layers. Just kind of squishes them together, never to be pulled apart again. But don't worry, you got your backup. One other thing we might do is a new layer. Okay, the little turned up page here, and we're going to go to edit, fill, and we're just going to put fill with black. Click OK, and make sure this layer is at the bottom here. It doesn't matter, you could fill it with white or any color. It looked kind of cool on black when I was working on it. Work on the green layer here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And what I want to do now is I'm going to use the Liquify tool. So let's go to filter and come down to here to this Liquify. Background disappeared, that's okay. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And what we want to do is we're going to use the forward warp tool, and we're going to pick a brush size that kind of fits within. You can see I'm using the square brackets to make it go bigger, or you can drag it up here under tool size. And And now it's kind of being as careful or as not careful as you want. I'm just clicking and dragging like I'm smearing the paint. Okay, you can see you can kind of accidentally go out. We'll do that on purpose in a minute. So it depends on what you're looking for. I'm just kind of doing it in little strokes, so I'm not trying to do the whole thing in one go. Just too hard, too hard. So I'm clicking, dragging, trying not to go off the line too much. Come on, mouse. Clicking, dragging, clicking, dragging. I'm okay with a couple of those bends. Okay, and then this one here, I want it to kind of swirl down across that one. All right, there was a bit up here that I missed. I'm going to use a smaller brush size just to kind of smear him as well. You might go over it a second time if you're not liking what you've got. Okay, I'm happy enough with it. It's kind of cool. It's not too smeary. Now, I want a couple of little drips, so I'm going to use the exact same tool. I'm just going to use a really small paintbrush. There's two things we need to do. One is we need to kind of get it going by clicking. I'm going to do one there. I'm clicking and dragging across. Maybe a slightly bigger brush. It's 45. Straighten it up then. Wow, it's terrible. Okay, I'm going to do one there. I'm just clicking and dragging, and maybe another one over here. Cool, and that gets us kind of part the way there, but then we're going to use these two tools here. Remember from the last video, we're going to use bloat and pucker. So bloat, pick our brush size. I'm going to pick, I don't know, something that size, and just kind of click on these ends here. I'm trying to make it look like there's a bit of a drip going. Bigger brush size. There we go. That one I don't want one on. That one I do. Little. There you go. I like to use the pucker tool as well. Same sort of thing, just kind of click it in there to make it a bit thinner. All right, here we go. Same with this one. I'm going to try and make it a little bit thinner as it's dripping down. Same with this one here, a bit too thick there, buddy. All right, and that's going to be our paint kind of drips. I want to like one of these to have a drop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click OK. So this is going to be it for the dragging the smearing paint around. We're going to click OK. Looks a whole lot nicer against the black. What I want is like a little drip drop that you saw at the beginning there. I'm just going to use the elliptical marquee tool, select a chunk of it. Maybe this bit there. Copy it and paste it. And with my move tool, I'm going to position it somewhere there, maybe shrink it down a little bit. It's a bit too big. Using my transform tool, Command T on a Mac, Control T on a PC. Now I'm going to go in, and what I could do, I'm actually happy enough with that, but you could go into now on its own layer and start distorting it because it's maybe a bit too perfectly round. But you could go to liquify now and push it around a little bit. I'd probably want to fix this bit up, but I'm not going to. What I'm going to do though is show you a couple little tricks. One is if it's on white, you might add a drop shadow to it. Looks kind of cool. And I vowed never to use it, but I want to add a bevel and emboss. I know, it might actually work in this case. I'm going to select both of these two layers because the drop is on a different layer from this green thing. And up here again, I'm going to do the exact same thing, merge layers. And with it selected, I'm going to go down to effects and I'm going to go to bevel and emboss. Okay, I've already played with this. That's why mine kind of came out okay. Preview on, preview off, but follow me. Okay, in a bevel and then play around with things like how deep you want it to be. Okay, and the size, and it will depend on your size of your image, the size of the text you're using. So it's all going to be a little different, but mainly depth, size, and make sure it's on in a bevel. And in my case, I'm going to make it come from the top left, and I feel like I've gone maybe too far. So I'm going to soften it down a little bit, actually change the size of it, actually change the depth of it is what I want. Yeah, it's looking kind of 3D-ish. Let's click OK. That could be it. I'm going to do one last thing. It's the burn tool. Okay, and we'll actually use the dodge tool as well. So the burn tool, remember, we've used in a couple of tutorials now. Okay, on this layer here, as long as it's not a smart object, it won't work. But with the burn tool, I've set it to mid-tones and I've got a brush size, what is that, 125. I'm just gonna kind of, can you see I'm just painting that in there just to make it a bit more extreme, say on some of these parts. Depends on what you want to do, right? I'm going to cast a bit of a shadow onto that as well because that G's above it. So I'm just kind of messing around now with some of those lighter parts. You could do this completely instead of the bevel. And what I probably want to do is definitely on this little drips and balls here. Okay, so you clicking, dragging. This one as well. I made terrible drips. Hope yours are better. All right, so those are them. Let's look at the dodge tool. It's the opposite of the burn tool. Okay, click and hold it down. There's the dodge tool. And I'm gonna do the same thing, but on the highlights. You can see just clicking a few times. Clicking gives highlights. Where else do I want them? Maybe on this thing here. Make that side shiny. Okay, that's just ugly. But we're getting the idea, right? All right, so that is how to make a painty, drippy thing. Doesn't really matter what the object is. You could get some clip art, it could be a love heart, it could be some social media icons. But in this case, we've done some scripty text. I like it. All right, on to the next video.